Alright guys, Blendersaurus here. We have just modeled our Herrerasaurus model for Herrera's Journey, the game. And now we are going to construct a rig. And you might be thinking the sculpting process is next, but what I like to do is to make the rig while the subdivision surface modifier is still unapplied yet. So what I'm going to do, when I go to Armature, add a single bone. We can uncheck this background image. We're going to put it at the center, turn on X-ray so we can see it through the model, and from here just pull it down, move it all the way to here, this main bone, subdivide it, pull this first bone back to where it goes across the entire thigh, the hip area, then subdivide this bone, move this bone to where it's right about where the shoulders are, extrude a bone from it, and extrude a bone from that. Shift D, add a new bone. Parent this bone to the head bone. We can actually name some of these while we're going. Alright, we subdivide the neck twice to give us 4 bones in the neck. We can name the neck neck, copy it, neck 1, neck 2, neck 3, neck 4. Alright, name these torso 1, so 2. Alright, now we do the tail, extrude from here, and parent it to the root bone. Keep offset, not connected. Subdivide, and then we move the bones into place. Subdivide and subdivide. That gives us 6 bones in the tail. It should be thinner as it moves on, because the tail gets more wiggly as it moves on. Alright, I like that. You might be thinking that's not enough bones, but I will show you that it is enough soon. Okay, now we've got all the bones that run down the center of the body. These are the non-symmetrical bones. Now we want to check in the armature options, X-axis mirror. Some do this another way, but I prefer to do it this way. You press Shift E and extrude. And now it makes 2 bones that are symmetrical. You can grab just one, and it will move the other on the opposite side. You might as well start naming them. Shoulder. Oops, that was right. Shoulder underscore L and shoulder underscore R. Now, it's going to get confusing in a moment when we have to name all the bones, but generally what I do, I don't make new rigs. I just repeat rigs over and over and over. So from T-Rex and Velociraptor, Allosaurus, Spinosaurus, I just repeat the rig and change the number of fingers or the position of the bones. But this is a new rig that I'm making. I generally just edit the rigs that I have. So once you edit the rigs that you have, I mean, you're good to go. You don't have to keep renaming bones. You don't have to remember what the bones are always named. But it's good to leave some consistency through all your rig names. That way the animations can translate. So this would be humerus underscore L. This would be humerus underscore R. This would be forearm underscore L. Forearm underscore R. Alright, now when we get into the fingers and toes, that's when it's going to get a little tedious, but it is absolutely necessary for me. Some don't name bones, but for me that can be confusing when you're editing the animations later. This would be hand underscore L. This would be hand underscore R. Alright. Now we're going to start with fingers, and the finger in the middle, and just extrude down to the side and line things up. These fingers are going to have 3 bones in them. These 2 fingers in the middle. So we're just going to line it up with the reference of the mesh. Alright, do it here as well. Increase the length of the bones, scale them up. I like that. Put the bones right here and delete the last bone. And now we're just going to scale up these 2. Let me just make sure all the axes are right. They're pointing the right direction. Good, because I want them to all be able to rotate the right way. Alright. The axes, though, can get a little cumbersome and get in the way. We just have 1 bone here. Alright, so what I named this is pinky underscore L. Pinky underscore R. This would be thumb 1 underscore L. And so this would be thumb 1 underscore R. This would be thumb 2 underscore R. This would be thumb 2 underscore L. Alright. Just don't get confused and focus your way through it to make sure you get all the names properly dispersed. You want to make sure all the names fit in the right places, because that will mess up your animations if you don't. Index 1 underscore L. Index 2 underscore L. Index 3 underscore L. Alright. And now index 1 underscore R. Index 2 underscore R. Index 3 underscore R. Middle finger. Middle finger 1 underscore L. Middle finger 2 underscore L. Middle finger 3 underscore L. You could do dot L or dot R. I just prefer underscore. Middle finger 1 underscore R. Middle finger 2 underscore R. Middle finger 3 underscore R. So it wasn't that bad, and Herrerasaurus has more fingers than most carnivorous dinosaurs. So if you're doing T-Rex, you only have 2 fingers to worry about. If you're dealing with most Carnosaurs or Titanurines, you got 3 to worry about. And maybe with Ceratosaurus, you might have an extra bone in the 4th finger. But Herrerasaurus is just this one bone here. Alright, now we're going to do the leg. From the front of the root bone, Shift E, move these 2, but don't clear parent, disconnect them by pressing Alt P. Grab the tips of these bones, bring them down like this, name them hip underscore L and hip underscore R. Alright, and then bring this bone down, this bone down, about the knee, and that would be thigh underscore L. Whoops, wrong one. This is thigh underscore R. This would be thigh underscore L. This will be shin underscore L, shin underscore R. Bring the hip bone in a little, so it's rotating actually in the leg and not outside of the leg. The knee comes in a little. The foot bone goes down like that. Name it foot underscore L. Underscore R. Move it to about the center of that toe and Control R to rotate it on its own axis, to roll it rather. That looks good. Now we're going to extrude out one bone from that. Actually move this one back a little. This here. And this is going to be called toe underscore. Well, I can't remember if it's toe underscore L or toe control underscore L. I think it's toe control. I'm not going to be copying any animations, but you want some conformity in the way your rigs are designed, just in case. So all the animations I'm going to make, I'm going to make them from scratch, but normally I wouldn't. I would copy animations and then make them specific to the dinosaur. So I'm going to extrude 2 toe bones for each foot, and this would be third toe underscore, third toe 01 underscore L, third toe 2 underscore L, third toe underscore R, third toe 2 underscore R. This isn't the first toe, but like I said, I want conformity in the rigs, and that is generally what I name it, because I name this one either fourth or Dewclaw. So I will name it. Actually, usually I don't make a bone for this Dewclaw because generally it's not important enough to move around. It's not like a velociraptor. So this will become first toe. Whoops. Underscore L. First toe, which should be first toe 1. So first, actually this should be 2, and this should be first toe 1. Underscore R. Underscore R. Oops. And this would be second toe, actually. fourth toe, but that was the way I named them back then, and I kind of stick with it to this day. Okay, so we've got the whole basic skeletal rig set up. Well, yeah, just the skeleton. So what I like to do is I don't want to apply the subdivision modifier until I press Control P, set parent with automatic weights, and everything should have weighted properly. So you can actually now use the bones to move the mesh around. And the reason I did this before applying the subdivision surface modifier is because the subsurf is, before it's applied, the model is still really low poly. So it's better to get rid of some of the excess weights when it's still low poly than to wait till when it's really high poly and you might miss something. So what you do is you check auto normalize. What this does is when you add weight to one bone, say the jaw, if I add weight to this, it takes away from the head bone so that only one can dominate this part of the mesh. If you didn't check auto normalize, then it could get some pretty weird movements. The jaw could be parented completely to the jawbone and to the head bone, and that's fine until one of them starts moving, and then it'll look pretty weird. And if you go over to your options, check X mirror and topology mirror. This is just something I do. I mean, it's not really as important when you have the mirror modifier on, but when your mirror modifier isn't on and you're working with something that has asymmetry, whether in its UV mapping or asymmetry in its in the model, you might want to leave this on because it does actually help with the skinning process. Alright, now, and I also like to turn the mirror modifier off because it does get in the way. Now I'm going to start subtracting from areas that don't really need the weight. The leg does not need the weight of the hip bones, the pubis and the ilium. So just start subtracting from that. It's not really subtracting the right way. So I'll just grab this bone and do it. Sometimes that happens when the mirror modifier is on or the X mirror is on. It'll subtract from the wrong side, but that's fine. You just turn it off and you keep going. You delete that, so it has less and less influence. In fact, no influence is good. This bone should not be influencing the torso, so just delete all that, subtract it away. In fact, it shouldn't have this much influence up here. And we'll touch this up more as we apply things. We'll blur it out some. This causes it to blend in better. With the jaw here, you just want to get rid of some of this top stuff, because this belongs to the head, and it looks really weird to move the eye socket and stuff with that. The neck shouldn't be moving any part of the head, and very little of the jaw. Most of the jaw should be controlled by the jawbone. The only part that you don't want control with the jawbone is completely is this part right here, because you do need a little bit of the neck attached to kind of have it shrink in when the jaw opens and closes. We can remove some weight there. Blur it a touch. Yeah, no, we're gonna add all that back. this once we apply it because it's still too low poly. Alright. Alright. Now, this will really get touched up in a second. Actually, I think it's good to go now. So what we do is we apply the mirror modifier and we apply the subsurf, and then we go back in here and delete the half that got applied by the mirror modifier. Because if we had just applied the subsurf modifier, it would have looked different than the result that we had. Because the mirror modifier was above it in the hierarchy. So it's just better to do it this way. Turn the clipping back on and make sure everything is still in place. Whoops. You want proportional editing off. Alright. Now we can do the specific weighting of the rig. We can delete the weights that are here on the fingers. These don't belong to it. To the hand. They do. This does though. Delete some of this. Looks good. Looks like we got some weight problems here. I don't know what it's grabbing onto. We're gonna have to remove it real quick. Okay, I think that was it. Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Now we subtract from here, we subtract there. Make sure nothing is attached that shouldn't be. There you go. Now we do this in the tail. Actually, we delete some of that. That's good. That needs weight. That's good. All of that was good, except for one bone. Now we're going to show you why you don't need to add multiple bones. Because unless you're exporting out maybe like FBX files for another game engine, all you have to do is go here to the bone tab of the armature. Oops, I didn't name the tail bones. That's probably something I want to do now. Tail, and then copy the text and write 1, tail 2, tail 3, tail 4, tail 5, switching to individual origins for the pivot, and rotating the tail like that. You can see all this crinkling and crackling it shouldn't be doing. All you got to do is go to the bone tab to deform, and where it says curved bones, increase the segment number. I generally go up to about 3. Maybe on this one add 2. It doesn't look better the more you add, so going up to 10 wouldn't help you. It would just be about 3. It's about how much topology is there. So if I go to only render, you see now it has a real bendy curve to it. And this is one of those wiggly tail dinosaurs. This is not a titanurine, a stiff tail. So its tail will be kind of whippy. And so it's good to have a lot of curve to it. Alright? And you don't just have to do this for the tail. You can do it for the body if it will hold up right now. Generally, I would say don't do it on the body as much. Like if you are, just do 2. Let me turn this down and see how it looks. If I rotate it back completely. See, that doesn't look as bad because it's a neck. It's not a tail. It's not as many vertebrae as there would be. But if you want to increase, it would be like 2 and 2 and 2 and then stop. Actually, not even 2 in the first one, just 2 in the middle. There can be some problems associated with the curvature of the bones. So generally the hands seem to be okay. That's kind of how they would bend. Alright, the toes. I want to bend. And you do have to do this on left side and right. Alright, there you go. Now, when we get into animation, we will actually create a rig. This is a skinning process to make sure that the weights are properly applied. We've given it a skeleton, but this is not the rigging process. We haven't rigged it in a way for animation. If we tried to animate this, it would be very clumsy. It would be weird. It wouldn't be an easy process. But when we finish the sculpting process, we will begin to start on the rig. Okay. Now, before we start the sculpting process, I want to finish up the seams, making the seams. Okay, we did the head and the torso. Now we need to do the hands. Alright, that's not too bad. Mark that seam, and then create one across here. Remove this one that's gone down to here, because you don't want a loop that's just there. Cut one up to here from about here is what I think. That'll do. And remove this. Make one across here. looks fine. I like that. We're going to open up our UV image editor by pulling this little tab aside, and we've made two windows, so we'll just close one. UV image editor, and no, we don't need a background image. We're just going to select all of the mesh. Make sure this is where it's good to have a mirror modifier, because unless the maps you have are going to be asymmetrical, you really only want one side, because then your maps can be smaller, they can be lower resolution, and it's just easier to keep up with. Now click unwrap, the first one here. Check these out, see what they're like. Okay, so we can see from here that it did not disconnect the leg completely, and that's why the map looks a little unusual. Okay, so the inside right here, we forgot to mark this scene. Now we're going to do it again, and everything comes out looking normal. Alright, except for this jaw here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it up with proportional editing. Actually use the cursor and scale from here. Maybe remove some of that. Back to the median point. And now I'm going to press Q to go into the UV sculpt and press S to smooth things out. That's not right. There, that's right. You want them to reflect what is going on with the actual model. So they don't need an even amount of space. It just needs to be in about the same shape as the actual model is. Alright. Some things are actually taking up a little too much space, so you can scale them down. That to me does not look very good. It's not aesthetically pleasing. But what I think I can do, instead of having to redo it completely, I can just click, and move it over to its proper position. Like that. Then move this one over some. Then go back into UV sculpt and smooth it out. Okay, now what UV sculpt won't do is it won't move the outer edge, the perimeter of the model. So you have to be conscious of that, cognizant of it. I think that looks fine. This one here. Alright, and so we're going to move along with the next part of our process. Very shortly we're going to start sculpting, and if we can just get this aligned, it's really bothering me. It's on sculpt, so it needs to be on smooth. We're ready to move into the sculpting process, and if we could just get these in place. Oh no. scale the tail down some because it is kind of in the way. The smaller parts can be moved to corners and things, and in between other spots. Actually, this can go right here, scale it up. This can go right here, scale it up. And this can be shrunk down a little to fit right here. Then you can move the hands down here, move the head up here because it is the most important. And move the feet. There. Now I actually like the way that's set up, and make sure nothing gets left out. And that's the UV map for this Herrerasaurus. That's what we're going to stick with. Alright, so now we save this as Herrerasaurus. Rig. I like to keep the unsubdivided model just in case. Now we're going to start the sculpt. So we're going to save as sculpt. This is the one we're going to be working on for a while. So let's just cut this video off